We are so excited to be here at Config, which is Figma's very first user conference. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us in person and all of those in the live stream. I'm Tori. I'm the creative director here at Figma, and I lead the brand team.
And I'm Noah. I'm Figma's product design director. Thanks so much for coming. We realize it's probably a little crowded in here for some of you. If you'd like, there's also, you can watch the stream. It's just a live feed in any of the rooms, or you're also welcome to stand if you'd like as well. So Tori and I actually both got started designing at a pretty young age.
As you can clearly see here, our design sensibilities were above average. These two are really excited to be here, and so are we.
I actually thought about wearing that exact outfit today, but Peter, our fashion consultant, said that it was a bad idea, so I didn't do that. But it's unbelievable to see all these Figma users here together at one time. This is our first time doing this, and it's just so exciting for us.
I'm also so glad you have the clicker, because like, it would be terrible. We have students, we have freelancers, product designers, brand designers, people from agencies and companies with teams of 2 and companies of hundreds, not just one. And we're joined by experts and novices and all of those who are in between.
There's a lot we can learn from each other, and whether it's online or in person, I actually feel like personally I've learned a lot more from this community and everyone here than I probably did in school or even in my first job.
Yeah, in general, it's pretty wild how much like our online interactions can lead to such fruitful changes in our careers or in mentorship. In fact, by show of hands, how many of you have ever met somebody on the internet that impacted your life in some way? Yeah.
Wow, it's like at least half or more. And actually, also one more question. How many of you have met someone here today already for the first time? Wow.
Like
That's
that you
awesome.
met online, that you knew online. OK. They probably all met each other for the first time today. Just saying.
So Tori and I actually also met online, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, this is our first exchange. I actually told Noah not to waste his time talking to me. And I had no idea what Figma even was. So it's wild. This was only 2 years ago. I was living in New York, and now I'm here.
It's stories like ours that we continue to hear from the community. And this theme of people reaching out to one another and helping each other, then becoming real friends and mentors, is really what makes our community special and different. And when we thought about creating our first conference, this is what we kind of wanted to facilitate and encourage.
Yeah, this conference really came from all of you. The content is yours, the topics are yours, and the community is yours. So I hope that will be your invitation to meet someone new today, share in your common experiences. Please be kind to one another. We hope you make connections with people you might not have met otherwise. And part of being in a community is really about looking out for one another and lifting each other up. So most of all, we really hope you can stay in touch after today. We think this is special, and we thank you for being here. We're humbled that you're a part of it. We get to be a part of it. So with that being said, we have such an awesome day ahead of us. All the details you need are in your programs that you got this morning. And so this morning until lunch, we're in this room together for keynotes.
And after lunch, we have a bunch of breakout sessions, one starting every hour throughout the venue.
And then we'll close the day with another keynote, after which we'll hang in the same area with food and drinks.
All right, so Tori, before we get started, actually, I thought ahead of time I wanted to prepare like a bunch of questions that I thought everyone might be wondering about. Is that cool?
That's like the best time?
I mean, I have no idea. Okay, we'll find out.
Go for it.
That's not a good one, actually, at all. OK, this is one that I don't think I've ever heard before. This is a brand new one. Should designers code?
I'm going to go for like next question on that one.
Yeah, that was a bad idea. I don't know why I did that. All right, here's an easier one. How should brand and product work more closely together?
Noah.
OK, yeah, this is, I don't know what I was saying. All right, so
we
do have some practical questions to get to, though. Where are the bathrooms?
That's actually a good question. So they are all the way in the back. Please feel free to use whichever one you want feels comfortable to you.
What else is there here?
There's a mother's room, and there's a reflection room as well. The info for both of those is in your programs.
Anything else people should know?
Yeah, we do take our code of conduct really seriously. Should you need help or you want to talk to anyone, any Figmate is a resource to you and can help. They're wearing the gray shirts that says Figma, or they have a name tag.
And what about snacks and coffee? Please tell me there's lots of coffee.
There are snacks. There are snacks throughout the venue. They'll be here all day. In this room, you can find them in the back. And we'll never run out of coffee, ever. We might, but we won't.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get this morning started. We have an amazing lineup of speakers to kick off the day, all with unique backgrounds and interesting stories to share.
Our first speaker needs no introduction. He's the CEO and the co-founder of Figma, Dylan Field. We do have his mom's email, and since she likes to embarrass him, that's how we got this photo. Thank you, Beth. I don't know where you are. Hey. Welcome, Dylan.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. A big thank you to Noah and Tori for being our MCs today, and a huge welcome to Config. Thank you for being here. This is a really special moment for us. It's our first of many things today, but especially our first user conference. We've done meetups across the world, but this is our first one with all of you here in San Francisco. And one thing that I'm really proud of, I'll make this full screen, is that Figma is an incredibly global community. So just to get a show of hands, how many people have actually traveled from outside the United States to be here today? It's amazing. Thank you so much. I think 4 of you have actually traveled from Bangalore today, which I think is wins the prize for largest distance traveled, clocking at almost 8,700 miles, which is incredible to see you here. And also shout out to Bruno, who made this map, which shows how we're all coming from and all the different places that we call home. So again, thank you for being here. We're really excited for today. We're also thankful for everyone who's tuned in via live stream. So whether you're giving up sleep, or you're giving up work, or neglecting family duties, we really appreciate you tuning in. And then finally, if you want to participate today via social media, our hashtag is #config2020. So feel free to tweet, Instagram, is it Byte? Whatever is the latest thing right now, you're welcome to post. So this is also a special moment for me because 7 years ago in August 2012, Evan and I started Figma. And Evan, my co-founder, and we faced a lot of skepticism originally. At first, people said, honestly, we're not sure this is going to work in the browser. There's a lot of doubt that that would actually be real. On top of that, when we launched 4 years ago on a certain website that's kind of like Hacker News, but for designers, we got a lot of comments. For example, some of them said, if this is the future of design, I'm changing careers. Another comment referring to multiplayer said, if you ever heard the proverb, a camel is a horse designed by a committee? And so thankfully, though, not everyone was doubtful, and we had a lot of supporters as well. So even before that launch, Payam Rajabi, for example, this is even back in 5 or 6 years ago, he actually created a 16-page spec saying, look, text editing doesn't quite work yet in Figma. It's pretty slow and janky, but I see so much promise in having a web-based tool. And he made a spec full of features like design systems, talked about how plugins could be created. And this was, again, like 5, 6 years ago. Incredible to see the foresight of our customers. Another example was Jacob, who I think is here somewhere today. And he created a video called Stop Sleeping on the Pencil Tool. Maybe some of you have seen it. I'm going to warn people here, if you have sensitive ears or if there's like little ones watching on live stream, perhaps cover them. It's worth it to see, but there are a few expletives. All right.
In 1987, Adobe Illustrator introduced the motherfucking pen tool. That little curvy little bitch where you put 1 point there and you put 1 point there. If you can't draw, it draws a fucking line between those points and you can wiggle waggle it around. That's fine, I thought. Sometimes I want to wiggle waggle some shit around as well. But guess what? My favorite tool, the pencil tool, has been cast aside, thrown out. Apps like Sketch, which are literally named motherfucking Sketch, they don't even follow your cursor anymore. Literally, how am I supposed to sketch with it? Apps like Figma don't even include the pencil tool. They think the pen tool is enough. And so here I am, 2017, Microsoft Paint, done. Mac Paint, done. I have to have a $9.99 subscription to Photoshop to draw a line from here to there with laser precision. Some fucking bullshit. Who is gonna write this wrong? This is a call for help.
So in response to that, we actually, within 24 hours, created the pencil tool. Turns out it wasn't that hard. Evan, my co-founder, did that one, and we shipped it right away. But the point here being that user feedback, regardless of how it's presented, has shaped the tool And we appreciate everyone here who can give us feedback and has given us feedback, which is a note. If you have thoughts today, find us. We're in the gray shirts. Give us your suggestions. We also, in terms of feedback, but also social media and resources for the community, Charli Marie is someone who created some amazing videos for us early on. And potentially some of you actually here, that's the reason that you started using Figma in the first place. Another person I want to highlight is Gleb from Russia. Gleb actually created an entire Russian community around Figma, translated a bunch of our resources into Russian, and also hosted people all over Russia to be able to participate in this community. We've seen the same thing with Namso in Africa. He's in Nigeria, in Lagos, and Namso created an entire Pan-Africa Figma meetup system, where many people are actually learning to design for the first time, as well as just sharing expert knowledge around design. And so, again, we're just super thankful for all the support across the world on this community. We also really are honored to have people that are prolific and forward-looking, like Alyssa. Alyssa, one of the things that she said recently was, where's GitHub for design? How do we take this open source notion that we have for engineering and actually bring it to the world of design? And I think you have a great content lineup today. I'm so excited. I'm going to have complete FOMO the entire day as I look at the schedule. But one of the themes is going to be this notion of how do we take open source and bring it to design. And that was originally inspired a lot by people like Alyssa, who are reaching out and saying, we want a tool for this. We want a place for this. How can we create it together? So last but not least, I want to thank the Figma team. Figma team, stand up wherever you are in here. All right. There's some team members. No, really, you got to stand up. I think a lot of the Figma team, a lot of our Figmates actually are also in the breakout rooms because they were told to not take all the seats in here. But if you find anyone in a gray shirt, again, please give us your suggestions, your thoughts, say hi. We're here to help. And if you need anything, just let us know. So without further ado, I want to talk a bit about 2020 and also show you what we've already been up to this year. So 2020, we've got 3 product pillars. The first one is creation. We always think that in terms of how to make it so that you can work faster and more efficiently in Figma, creation is at the heart of all that. Secondly, collaboration. How do we come together and build products better as a team? That's not just about things like multiplayer, but it's also about how do we give each other better context, and also about how do we give each other better ways to give feedback and be able to see more context on and present work better to each other. And finally, community. As we just discussed, this is going to be a huge theme for this year. How do we build a community? And today is a physical instantiation of that, but we're also really focused on the digital version of that. How do we make it so that more people can come together online, share resources, and actually learn from each other? And so we're going to dive into each of these themes. I'm going to show you some of the small projects that we've worked on already. There's tons of stuff coming in the next few months. This is a sneak peek. About half the stuff today is going to ship today. The other half will be shipping over the next coming weeks. It's all live demo, so if something goes wrong, please forgive me in advance. First off, creation. For creation, we're going to focus on the 3 pillars of graphic design: type, colors, and spacing. And I'm going to take a sip of water. All right. So first off, on type. Let me just first introduce where we're at. So this is Twigma. You could call it an offshoot of Figma. Twigma is a app that you can use to buy plants. And just note that all plants are 15% off in February. So what we're going to do is we're just going to update some of the styles here and make it so that we do a little bit of a brand refresh for Twigma. I'm going to open up just to show you sort of how it was before. One thing that we're going to show you for fonts and type is an updated font picker. So just to remind you, the way that font picking works today in Figma, I'll zoom in. I go over here, and I click this menu, and then I have this very long list of fonts that I can scroll through forever. So now we're trying to make it a bit of a better experience. So if I zoom in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this style right here, this local style. And I'm going to do that by clicking on Arial. And we're going to change it to white ink trap. But I could also, if I wanted to look for other fonts, this just shows the fonts in my document. I can also search. I can also, if I want to, I can go to a More Fonts panel. And I can actually edit my favorites. I can take away American Typewriter. I can add something else, maybe Avenir. And then from there, I can actually go back and change the style as well. So hopefully, this makes it so that changing fonts in Figma becomes a lot easier to do. Assuming the AV doesn't go weird on us. One moment. Here we go. So I can change this back to white ink trap. And now we can see that our fonts are updated across this design. So anyway, so I wanted to highlight that as an example of the font picker changing. It's a little detail, but something that we're really excited about. We think will make it a lot more efficient to do work in Figma. The second demo that I want to show off is a better way to change colors in Figma. So right now, if I go into this selection right here, we have a bunch of different colors in this selection. There's fills, there's a sort of like mustard fill, a green, there's type fills, and there's also potentially text as well. And so how do we actually change all these colors? Right now I have to double click into each one, change them each individually. So in contrast, one thing that we're starting to look into is this idea of making it so it's easier than ever to change colors in Figma. And so we can do that by, you'll see over here, there's a selection colors panel. And this makes it so that everything in your selection you can instantly see, and you can change right away. So if I click on this old Figma mustard, I can change it to a light purple, for example. And it just changes right away. I can also take this dark green, and from there, I can change this to a purple as well. And you'll see that it updates as I go. And this makes it so much easier to change colors across text, across icons, fill, stroke. It's really a game changer when it comes to efficiency. And so I'm excited for all the time that you're going to save for this one. It's already saved our team a ton of time just beta testing it. Next up, I'm going to show you some changes to auto layout. So as a refresher, auto layout is a way to basically make it so that containers are the size of their children. What do I mean by that? So if you haven't seen it, auto layout was one of our more popular launches last year. And if I take this button, for example, and say save config, I don't know why, but we'll just say it, you'll see that the button updates along with the icon. One of the things that we heard when we shipped auto layout was that there's a lot of need for constraints with auto layout. And so today we're introducing one step in that direction. We're making it so that you can actually add stretch constraints to auto layout. So first and foremost, I'm going to just update this for this design. And I'm going to, here we go. I'm going to change the auto layout stack from horizontal to vertical and recenter it. And just to show you, if I was to try to move this today, it actually wouldn't work. It doesn't change at all. Nothing's different. However, if I go in now, I select each of these, and I change it to a horizontal stretch constraint, now I can go in, and all my content will behave responsively. So we're excited to keep improving auto layout, but this is, I'm also really thrilled to see what you're going to do with this. Last but not least, on the creation side, one more. I have to hook this up, so give me a second. We're going to, this demo is going to be a sort of a, we'll call it maybe sort of like a Tinder for plants. So one piece of feedback we've been hearing quite a lot is that it'd be great to have a support for key down events in prototyping mode. And if you look at this, we've actually added the ability to have on your gamepad This is already set up, so I'll just zoom in just so you can see. If you press the B button, it'll go to the next part of the prototype. So let's see what that looks like. This is the Xbox accessible controller, by the way. It's very neat. So if we like this plant, oops. There we go. Let's see if it works. If we like this plant, we can see that it actually hooks up and it goes to the right, or I can go to the left, and we can then train Figma on what plants we like. OK, we'll admit it's a silly demo, but while a silly demo, something that people have been requesting for ages is to have the support for being able to navigate prototypes this way. So just to recap, we have 4 features that are launching today in the creation category. So first of all, we have a font picker that's going to be updated. This will make your work way more efficient to find type. This is coming soon. Available right now is selection colors, as well as auto layout with stretch. And finally, gamepad support is coming quite soon. Next up is collaboration. I'll unplug my controller. So when we think about collaboration, we think about a bunch of different areas that we can improve. Some of them include how do we make it so that people have better context around what they're collaborating on, as well as making it so that more people can then access the design and be able to give feedback at the right time. And I will show off a few of the different features that we're looking at here around this. So first and foremost, if I go here, one thing that we've done last year around June was we launched plugins in Figma. And plugins it's been amazing to see the uptake. We've had around 350 plugins already created by a number of different creators. But one issue that we've seen is that, let's say that you actually use a plugin in your design. There's no way to actually see if you're somebody else coming into the design, what plugin has been used, and how do you actually get back to that plugin in order to update the design. I'll give an example. This map was created by a plugin called Mapsicle. And it's awesome that it's there, made it really efficient to put the map in. But let's say I want to update the map to perhaps the location we're at today. Before, I would have to know that it was created in Mapsicle, go find the plugin, download it, and then use it again. One thing we've changed today is the ability to now open this in Mapsicle just by clicking this button right here. And I'll zoom in so you can see it. And from there, now I can actually update in Mapsicle to the area that we're at. And I'll press Update Map. And you can see it updates live right in the canvas. The other area that you can see this is, for example, a plugin called Notepad, which makes it so that we can actually leave notes in the file. And so now I'll say, hello, config. And this makes it so that everyone's able to see what plugins have been used in the file before. The next feature, you might be surprised that we didn't have it in the version 1 of Figma, because it's sort of an example of the web done right, I think. And that's links in Figma. So before, it was impossible, unless you're in prototyping mode, to actually make links in the editor. And now, with this feature, you'll be able to link to things both outside of Figma and inside of Figma. So let's see some examples. So if I click this link to check out PRD, you'll see it opens up our Notion page. We can actually see the Figma PRD, which is surprisingly detailed. If I go to our cover page, this is actually an area that we've seen used a ton in terms of how we've been using this feature internally over the past few weeks. And so I can actually then go to different pages. But I can also go to different nodes as well, or even a prototype, in order to see what does it look like to use this in Figma. And I think as you start to explore the different ways that links can impact your designs and make it easier to organize things for stakeholders, it'll really change your design process internally. And then finally, one thing that we've heard honestly since the start of Figma is a request to make it so that when you share a prototype with other people, it's impossible to get back to the file. This is an area of Figma that, at first we were trying to make it more open. And then the feedback that we got was very much clear that you shouldn't necessarily always have access to the file if you have access to the prototype. This is especially important for people that are contractors, as well as agencies, who might be giving a prototype to a client and waiting until sign-off and payment in order to give the full file access to the client as well. And so today, we're also excited to announce that if you go to share, you'll be able to now go here in the bottom right-hand corner. Oops, I'll just zoom in quickly. And you can see that if you click here, you can press Show Advanced Prototype Settings. And for Show Advanced Prototype Settings, you can now make it so that only people with a prototype link can view the prototype as well. And so this is something that might seem small, but is really important for a lot of people in our community. And we're excited to put it out there. So to summarize, we've got the Plugin Inspector API, which is available now. And then hyperlinks and also prototype-only sharing are coming in the next few weeks. Last but not least, we have community. And so we launched our community back in October. And we've had a very small closed beta. A big thank you to everyone here who participated in the Quilt. We're actually going to go over that in a second. But the community's mission was really to make it so that people could start to view source for design. How can you make it so that more people can actually see into the design process and be able to participate and learn from each other, and then also share their work in an available, accessible way that other people can build on. And we're really, really thrilled to see that people have started to do that. These tools were not available for designers before. It was impossible to do that at scale and with a place that actually had that norm. And so by trying to combine a tool, an authoring environment with a space, we think that there's an opportunity to make it so that more people engage in open source design. And there's been all sorts of content created by the community. These are a few examples of tags that have started to crop up, but there's also been games. There have been like tutorial files. It's been, actually, on the topic of games, I saw our first RPG created in Figma the other day. I mean, it's amazing. And so I'm going to show a few examples of the files that have been created so far. So if I go to the community page, one thing I'll show off, and this is actually going to be a talk is given by Miguel later today, is the VS Code kit. There's actually an entire toolkit for VS Code that you can view in Figma. You can see it's been duplicated and liked quite a lot of times. And you can go in here and you can actually learn from how VS Code is being developed. Another area that is really interesting to see is all the people that have created illustrations in the community. So Bonnie, who's going to give a talk later today on illustration, for example. Hey, Bonnie. Has created a ton of different awesome work here, too. Some of which seems to be just uploaded recently, because I didn't see this yesterday when I was practicing. But I definitely encourage you to check out her profile and also attend her talk later to see how you, too, can create illustrations in Figma. We've also seen companies like Google create material design and upload it to Figma. So, oops, I'll search material. Here we go. So material design, we all know and use it. And so now you can actually use that right in Figma, right from Google. And they'll be able to update this, and you'll be able to pull in the updates as well. For Gleb, who I mentioned earlier from Russia, he's also been very busy. One of the things that he created that I thought was quite neat was a Pac-Man game. And so you can play this even in multiplayer if you like. But I think one of the things that has been really neat to see is just how we've changed the notion of remixing in the community since we started. So when we started, there was no way other than to tweet to find other people's work. And so now there's two things that have come to the community recently. One is a Discover page where you can see all the popular work, and the other is remixes. So for example, this config Quilt template that we have right here, you can actually go and see all the remixes. And these are all remixes that people from this group here have actually created, and we've assembled into a quilt. And so you can see all the different things people have made in that quilt, which is, I think, just totally magical. And a huge round of applause for everyone who made something for this quilt today. When I think about open source design, here we go. When I think about open source design, I think that this remix idea is a really powerful concept. And so I want to give a few suggestions of things that you could remix today. One is material design. Go in, engage, and actually give suggestions. Another one is open source projects. For example, this is a project called Monero, which is actually a private cryptocurrency. And they've started doing some of their open source work on Figma. And so you can go in now and actually contribute back to Monero and give people tips or actually give feedback to the person who created it. And then also another one that's really cool to see is actually Twitter took their entire emoji set. They call it Tweetmoji. And this is over 3,000 Twitter emojis that you can now use for free in your designs as long as you reference back to Twitter. But you can also go tweak that as well and go give those suggestions to Twitter. And as I think about where we're going with community, to me it's really exciting to have this idea of open source design because we've never had it before. And I think it's potentially a way for people to make it so that open source is better and make it so that open source projects can be a real alternative to the projects that we have from established companies as well. So in summary, we've got 3 product themes for 2020. First, creation, the ability to work faster, smarter, and just be more efficient. How do you get your thoughts onto the canvas as quickly as possible and make it so there's no barrier between your brain and Figma? Secondly, collaboration, making it so you can build products as a team and establish context better. And third, the community. We've had over 1,000 files created, but this is just the start. We're in a closed beta period right now, and we're really excited to welcome more people in. So if you're on the live stream and you're not in the Figma community yet, you definitely come and tweet at us, and we'll try to let you in. And we'll be growing the number of people in the community soon as well. So in summary, thank you. And also, if you're interested in seeing any of the things I just demoed, meet us at the demo bar, where we've got Figmates here and ready to show off the features, and you can play with them live. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dylan. There's so much exciting product stuff coming down the line. I'm personally most excited about selection colors and hyperlinks. Makes my life easier. It seems small, but we've been using it a lot on our team, and it's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of really great features, but honestly, I'm more excited about Twigma. I mean, I'm really into plants, and I'm just going to use that 15% off deal, whatever that was.
It's not real, but OK.
So now that Dylan has given you a peek into everything underway, we wanted to actually step back and explore some bigger questions around the nature of collaboration. We know that deep collaboration is hard to do in our always-on digital culture. It's always hard to look away from our phones. There's all these notifications, and they're always demanding our attention. And Tori.
I'm tweeting. OK, just kidding. In all seriousness, our next speaker has spent a lot of time thinking about this. Craig Maude is a writer, he's a photographer, and a designer. Community is actually how Craig got started in design. At 13, he made art with designers on IRC, and it was those relationships that got him started in design. He's going to share the story of a 40-day walk he went on in Japan. It was an experiment of sorts, his effort to experience deep collaboration with both his online community of readers and the local people he met along the way. Everyone, please welcome Craig Maude.
Good morning. I'm Craig Maude, and I am exhausted. I'm really tired. How many of you out here today are a little bit worn down? Psychically, physically, existentially? Anyone here a little bit existentially tired? Just let out like a soft sigh if you're existentially tired. Yeah, it's a weird time to be alive. We are processing a lot of information every day. It's kind of crazy how much information we are absorbing every day. Sometimes it's so crazy and I'm so overwhelmed, I'll be sitting in a cafe and I'll just close my laptop and I'll look around and I'll go, okay, I'm pretty sure everyone took a shower and put on clothes today. We're doing all right. That's my baseline. That's how crazy things are. That if everyone takes a shower and puts on their clothes, things are okay. So it's a weird moment in time, and I think there are a couple ways to respond to this sense of overwhelming information and information overload. And one is to go to a cave. That is, like, literally just move to a cave and microdose LSD and disappear from the world and just sort of live out and say, I'm going to be a Luddite, and I'm not going to touch technology ever again. I'm never going to use my smartphone. I'm done. I don't think that's that interesting of a way to respond. I believe in technology. I love technology. I grew up with all sorts of technology. As they said on IRC when I was 13, I was making ANSI art. Anyone here know what ANSI art is? Yeah, ANSI art. And I believe in the power of technology. And I also think that going forward, we are not going to see a decrease in the density of information that we have to process every day. So, the past 9 years, I have come up with a couple of guidelines, I have two, that have helped me deal with this information overload sense. First is establish boundaries, physical or psychic, around communication channels. And then the second is design the way you work with tools instead of allowing tools to dictate how you live or how you work or how you design. Seems very simple. And I'm going to tell you today the story of 2 moments in my life where I was just flat out empty, exhausted to the bone. And I responded in part to that exhaustion by making books. This is kind of my therapy. It's an act of palliative care. Try to get over that exhaustion. And my hope is that these books can provide archetypes, however odd they may be, and they're kind of weird, and these projects are a little bit strange. They may or may not relate to your everyday work, but I hope they provide some archetypes around these guidelines of boundaries and tool use. So, first exhaustion. First exhaustion happened about 9 years ago, and it was an exhaustion of output. Just too much output. And I was working on the Flipboard for iPhone team. It was very early on in the startup. It was a very small team. And I have to add a footnote here. We had an intern. He was very young, extremely young intern, but very wise. It's kind of strange. He's very kind, sort of like a mix between the Dalai Lama and Yoda. And everyone in the office would whisper and say, that intern seems like he's going to make something of himself someday. And his name was Dylan Field. So Dylan was our intern, and I took Dylan under my wing, and I taught him everything I knew about macromedia fireworks. And that's why Dylan founded Figma. So we're 9 months into building the Flipboard for iPhone product, and we're all really tired. The whole team's exhausted. And I'm trying to figure out why I'm exhausted. Where is this exhaustion coming from? Because I think it's important. I think this sense of exhaustion is pervasive, and I think because it's pervasive in society, it is worthy of attention. And so I was trying to figure out, what is it that's really getting to me? And I realized we had been producing and running so fast over the last 9 months. And all of the stuff we produced was just sitting in folders. And a folder with 1 item in it feels the same as a folder with 1 billion items in it. And I think this is one of the problems of working in digital space, is having an understanding of the boundaries of the actual completeness of what you've worked on can be really, really difficult. So, like I said, personal therapy, I made a book. I did it secretly. I didn't tell anyone in the office I was making this book. I just needed to kind of help myself feel better and feel more grounded. So I made this. 2 copies, 1 foot by 1 foot, 300 pages, 6 kilograms. I printed it actually just down the road with Gleb, who's an actually really cool print-on-demand company. And just being able to make 1 or 2 books in the world is kind of a miracle. We forget that 30 years ago, making 1 book of this size would have been unthinkable. And to do it really quickly, even more unthinkable. And on the cover of the book, I put the first Git commit. First hack of iPhone version of Flipboard, currently hard-coded to show the FlipTech feed, Saturday, February 19th, 2011, 9:35 p.m. And we talk about digital stuff as not being intimate. And to me, this is almost too intimate. 9:30 on a Saturday night. Why are you programming Flipboard? That's just what we did in Silicon Valley in 2011. And then on the back, we have the last commit, equally suggestive of something, perhaps overworking ourselves. December 1st, 2011, 4:47 a.m. Working all through the night, multiple nights, and then the last push, like Indiana Jones grabbing his hat to get it into the App Store. Whew, we made it. We hit the deadline. And then the book itself, I took all of the design comps we had made over the last 9 months, and I just laid them out from the very first comp all the way through. All of the weird permutations we went through, the UI, UX sketches, the actual sketches from sketchbooks, the typographic grids that we were using. And what's interesting is that when you shift mediums, so you go from this folder of just a list of images to a medium of print, and this is 2 feet by 1 foot, really high resolution. This is an incredible screen. And you put these 12 comps out in a row. I did it chronologically just to save time and to make it easy. But what's interesting is that you look at this, and the first reaction to this screen is that, oh, it's all the same thing. But then you look more closely and you realize how much micro-typographic iteration was going on throughout the process, and this is really hard to remember sometimes. So immediately, I was getting some value out of this. And of course, an app is not just design, it is commits. We had about 10,000 of them, so I laid out 10,000 commits. 3-point font. And what's interesting about the 30,000-foot view of commits is that commits and commit messages begin to take on a texture all their own. And so as new engineers would join the project or would leave, the very texture of these pages, it was about 80 pages of this, the very texture of these pages would start to shift and shimmy, and you could kind of see where and when people came and left. So I had this book. We launched the product. It went really well. We were having a meeting after the launch. About 12 of us on the team. We were sitting around a table, and I said, hey, I got a gift for everyone. And they were like, ooh, Godiva chocolates? I was like, no. A big, boring white book. Boom. And they're like, what's that? And so we opened it up, and you could feel as we started to turn the pages, the air in the room shifted. It was very weird. It's almost paranormal. There was this stress that was suddenly let out of the space. People started crying. I mean, we were really tired. And I thought, okay, this is good. This is useful. This is the value of this thing. Great. This is, I give one to the team. I keep one for myself. And what was interesting is that as time has passed, right? It's been 9 years now. As time has passed, the value of this book has only increased because we can't go back in time the way we develop software today. You can only ever touch the latest version of an app in the App Store or a web project. If I want to go use the 2011 version of Flipboard, you just can't. The API endpoints aren't going to work. Phone screen sizes are all different. It's just not going to function. So the only way to touch that work that we did is to go to this book. Now, I'm not saying that everyone, for every product you ever make, you should make a book. Although it would be kind of cool, right? Imagine if you could go to Apple, and Apple had the Apple Library. And inside the Apple Library, it was like 10,000 books of every single app ever made for the Mac or iOS. That would be probably a genuinely useful resource to go back in time and look at Mac Paint from the 80s. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is we can embed more moments into the process of producing an app, working on a project, to think about what is it that we've built, that we're building. In other words, to just have a little more self-awareness. And I think I made this book at the end of the process, and I really wish that we had had more touch points going through it, where we had these moments of self-reflection. There probably would have been less crying when I revealed the book. Also, by creating an artifact, you're giving shape to your work. And this is important because your mind will absolutely lie to you later. You will misremember. You'll forget the bad stuff, you'll remember some of the good stuff, but you'll miss all the important details. And so having this artifact that future designers and future folks can come into and reference and remember and reflect on the work that you've done, I think is really important. So that was the first exhaustion. Second exhaustion. This is about 15 months ago. I was exhausted by too many inputs. I just had too much information coming into my life, and I felt really overwhelmed. And I thought, how can I design both a tool and an experience that allows me to be present in the world, but also connect with my community in meaningful ways? Now, I have to give you a little bit of background before I explain this project. For the last 6 years, I've been doing a lot of walking in Japan. It started off, I've been living in Japan for the last 20 years or so. That's another important point. For the last 6 years, lots of walking in Japan. It started off kind of as just a hobby with some friends, but it grew into this obsession. I'm inviting artists and writers and photographers and entrepreneurs from around the world over, and we go on walks, sometimes for an afternoon, sometimes for 2 days, 3 days, 8 days, 2 weeks. Sometimes it's a group of 10. I've done so much walking now that local governments have hired me to consult with them about tourism and walking. Walking in Japan has become a core part of my identity, sort of unplanned. It's a big part of my life. And the more I've walked, the more I've realized that a walk itself is a tool. I mean, this is kind of obvious and kind of not obvious, but a walk can be a platform. And I started thinking about how to use walks as platforms. And one of the ways I've used it is that I have my newsletters. So I publish to tens of thousands of people every month about walking, which is a really strange thing. I did not think so many people were going to be into walking. Turns out, lots of people are really, really into walking. And the more I've walked, the more I've thought, where does it go? You go on these incredible walks with folks, you spend days together, you have amazing conversations, and then it kind of just dissipates. So I started looking through the history of what people have done with their walks. You have things like Martha Gellhorn and her book Travels with Myself and Another that chronicles her journey in Africa alone in the mid-20th century. It's a pretty incredible book. It's hilarious. It's amazing. So classically, put your walk, put your adventure in a book. Lori Lee, as I walked out one midsummer morning, left his house in England, got on a boat, got off in Spain, walked from Porto to the other side of Spain as the Spanish Civil War broke out. It's an incredible, hilarious, well-observed book. Unbeaten Tracks in Japan, Isabella Bird. Late 1800s, this British woman goes to Japan just as the Meiji Restoration is happening, and she travels around Japan on her own and writes a hilarious account of it. So books, very classic way to give shape to a walk or an adventure. 1927, the artist Oskar Fischinger wanted to capture his walk from Munich to Berlin. So he took a video camera and used it as basically a stop-motion film camera. Richard Long, in 1967, used a walk as a literal tool to make this line. This is called a line made by walking. Just walk back and forth. Most recently, just a few months ago, a Japanese designer and developer named Inasa Fujio started working on a project that has captured the attention of at least Reddit and also other parts of the internet. But he's making a video game where all you do is walk around countryside Japan. That's it. And what's amazing about it is it's not photorealistic, but he has captured the textures, the light, the details, like the way the concrete on this wall looks, the moss on the ground, the shape of the shrubbery, this staircase and how it's not perfectly straight going up. This is the closest I've ever seen anyone or anything get to walking in Japan without actually walking in Japan. It's amazing. I hope that this is available for VR for everyone soon. And the more I've looked at the work that everyone's done, the more I realize that to walk, to really move through a place and be present, is to apply this rigor of process of knowing a place. And I find that to be really inspiring. So 15 months ago, I was really tired, too many inputs, and I wanted to get to know Japan even more deeply than I had up until that point. So I decided to go on a really big walk. And I carved this time out in my life. I made plans about 6 months in advance to do this giant walk. I started in my hometown, my home south of Tokyo, walked up to Tokyo, up through the plains, the Kisoji, down through Nagano into the Gifu plains, and then around Lake Biwako, down to Kyoto. And then I kept walking on past this, but this is the main bit. This is called the Nakasendo. It's an ancient Japanese highway. In total, I walked about 1,000 kilometers for 43 days. I published 25 SMSs. Going to talk about that in a second. And I recorded about 10 hours of audio. So it was very productive. And the question I had that both inspired the walk and the walk inspired was, how do I share all of this while still being present? Because, like I said, I don't want to be in a cave. I don't want to be a cave person. And I like Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and TikTok and all of those things. But they all suffer from the same problem, which is you have to look at them to create in them. You have to gaze upon the content abyss of a timeline in order to make something. And I don't know about you, but I can't resist. I get sucked in. The comments are there. They're coming in real time. It's all very distracting for me, and I get overwhelmed. And I find oftentimes I forget what I was even there to do in the first place. So I made a tool. I worked with developers Josh Miller, Hirsch Argwal, and Josh Lee in New York, and we made an SMS publishing tool. Because we were sort of chatting about what are underused spaces on the phone that are intimate, but no one really uses for experiments or publishing. And so we thought SMS was kind of a fun, undertapped area. And you subscribe to my walk. So I told all my newsletter people, I said, hey, you can subscribe to the walk by texting walk to this number. Everyone, you're going to be deleted when the walk is done. Don't worry. You're not going to get SMSs from me for the end of time, just about 25 days. I didn't know how many subscribed. I didn't want to know the numbers. That was kind of part of it. I didn't want to have any sense of what was going on in the background. The response is, I told everyone you can respond over SMS, but I won't see it immediately. They'll be stored on the server. And then a physical book will be automatically generated, i.e. I'll make InDesign templates. It will be automatically generated. And then when I get back from my walk, my diary entries and photos and everyone's responses will be there in that book waiting for me at home. We'll make one copy of it. That's it. And really what this project was contending with is this tension between real-time and asynchronous communication. And it's not to say real-time is good, asynchronous is bad, real-time is bad. They're two different tools. And I think oftentimes we may over-index for the value of real-time when actually what we want and the higher fidelity of communication comes from asynchronicity. And I think this project kind of hit on that. And the last thing before I get into the actual walk is that when you think of a walk as a platform, so it's like an operating system. Like a walk is like Mac OS. And you can build software on top of a platform. And so my software for the walk was defined by these rules. No media, so no news, no magazines, no articles, no social networks, no podcasts. The thing that is so powerful about a smartphone is it's a teleportation device. And it's great when you're in a place you don't want to be. So you're commuting on the train, it's smelly, it's tough, you're tired, you just don't want to be there. You can put on a podcast, listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, and you're not there anymore. That's amazing. I didn't want to experience that. My other rule is I had to consolidate everything I was collecting every day. So data about the walk, photos, I was taking hundreds of photos a day, recording audio every day. I had to publish one SMS a night. So that was my moment at night, at the inn, when I was done with the walk for the day, consolidate everything, and then publish one thing to the SMS system. And I had another rule, which was to shoot someone's portrait before 10 a.m. every morning. I had to do that. And that was a really powerful rule, actually. And this is the funny things about rules, is like no one was going to, come after me if I didn't shoot someone's portrait before 10 in the morning. But it would be, 9:45, and I go, oh man, it's about to be 10, I got to shoot someone's portrait. And I would just pop into places. So like I popped into this cafe, and I met these two sisters who took over this amazing cafe. They're running a flower shop next door, and the owner of this cafe passed away. He was 85 years old. He just suddenly passed away. And this was an incredible community hub. And no one in his family had the time to run the cafe. And so these two sisters said, all right, we'll take your cafe over for you. I popped into this third-generation tatami shop in the middle of nowhere because it was 9:55 and I was getting really anxious. And you walk in and they're very suspicious. Who are you and why are you here? You're literally the first foreigner to ever walk into this tatami shop. He started talking to him. I can speak Japanese. And by the end of it, you ask if you can take their portrait, and then they don't want you to leave. This farmer was definitely drunk. I don't know. It was 9:30 in the morning. I like this guy. He was just watering his lawn. We had a wonderful chat about his town, which was a kind of a famous onsen village, hot spring village. This guy was covered in blood. I asked no questions. He really wanted to talk. And so we did. We talked for about a half an hour. And this road that he's standing on is the historic road, and he's been farming next to it for his entire life. And already a few days into this walk, I realized I was having more connections. I was meeting more people. I was feeling a deeper sense of presence than I had in any of the other walks I had done up until that point. And another thing I noticed, and you've probably noticed, is everyone is really old, for the most part. Very, very old. And this is something you hear a lot about Japan, aging population. What's going to happen? Japan is some of the oldest, in terms of average, population in the world. Over 65 people are just, it's expanding at a rate that's kind of difficult to comprehend. And if you visit Tokyo or Osaka or Kyoto or Fukuoka or even Kanazawa, your perception of Japan might be that, oh, everyone's young because all the young people from the countryside go to the cities. But then when you walk and you apply that rigor of process to the countryside, and you are forced to contend with everything you are walking past because you're present, you're not teleporting somewhere else, you're forced to contend with the fact that everyone you're passing is really old. And I found that to be powerful. It's this difference between reading or seeing something and viscerally experiencing it every day, hours and hours on end each day. There's an amazing photographer, Shiho Fukuda, who's done an incredible series of portraits of elderly women in Japan who got themselves arrested because life in prison was a higher quality of life than being alone in the countryside. And I had seen these photos before, and they never really made sense to me until I was walking through some of these villages. But because I had this system in place, and I knew that at night I was going to be publishing, I was also just so curious about the stories of everyone. Because I was like, is this what I want to tell to the... I didn't know how many people were out there. 2 people subscribed to the SMS thing, or 200, 2,000? I didn't know. So I met people like Yamaguchi-san, who is retired. He collects his pension, but he also traps deer. He traps 100 deer a year. And in fact, I was walking down this road, and he sort of emerged from the forest. Like, you know that gif with Homer Simpson coming out of the bush? That's Yamaguchi-san. He scared the hell out of me. He's like, hello, hi, I'm trapping deer. And he knew the owner of the inn I was staying at. He's like, oh, tell him I said hello. But meeting people like Yamaguchi-san, or meeting these tomato farmers in this kind of David Lynchian diner in the middle of nowhere. And these guys, they weren't working this day, but they were still wearing their jumpsuits. And I said, can I take your portrait? And he said, yeah, but you got to make us famous. I said, and this guy on the left actually said, put me in the New York Times. I said, all right, what's your name? And he says, Tomato Farmer. There you go, Tomato Farmer, you're on a live stream. Or Mama, who was just the most amazing, beautiful, gentle, lightest soul of the whole walk, 83 years old, skis. How many times a year do you think she skis? How many people think less than 5 times a year? 120 times. Very close, 30. She skis 30 times a year. She's been running this cafe for 50 years. We talked for about 4 hours. And so I had all these experiences, and I was publishing to this SMS thing at night, which was kind of like yelling into a black hole, which was really freeing, actually. It was kind of an amazing experience as a creator because I didn't feel any tension. I didn't feel anything about it being performative. Nothing was coming back in real time. And I got home from the walk, and the book was waiting for me. And it was kind of moving. And it had more than 25 pages in it. I thought maybe it was just going to be my little photos or whatever. It's about 80 pages of responses. There were a lot of people responding. And they sent little photos of their own, and they sent their own messages. And on the left is my photo, and on the top right there is my little, sending out basically little haikus every day. And then all the rest of it is just responses from people hanging out on the SMS system. And there were some technical glitches. And so I couldn't see the SMSs, the responses, but the tech people could. I said, if you're not getting images, respond with no images. And so we have 3 or 4 spreads of no images. And I told everyone, I'm not reading news. I'm not looking at the news. And so one person sent me a headline from the New York Times every day. So there's this weird ambient New York Times thing going on. It's like, oh, it was a quiet, beautiful, comfortable place. And then the real world comes crashing in every couple of responses. And so when I was looking at this, I got it. I went to a cafe near my house. I spent about 3 hours just reading through everything. And I realized, man, context, again, obvious, but man, when you feel it, when you experience it, it's a different thing. Context affects intimacy tremendously. And the responses were crazy. These are all anonymous. Today was the day my mother died. No one's going to send me that over email or on Twitter. And I'm glad that this platform gave that person the ability to express himself in that way. I don't know what to reply to you, Craig, except keep walking. Weird that you won't get this in real time, but you will imagine people wishing you to keep walking. I wish I was walking now. Me too. As I went to sleep with the pulsing fog horns of the Bay Area, I remembered that in the morning I would wake to another moment from your walk. This picture of an elderly man watering his lawn or garden is actually what I needed right now. I've been going through a rough patch of self-doubt and depression, and it's weirdly comforting to look at this picture. So this was going on. This was pretty affecting for me, and I had this incredible account of my journey. And so I was reading through and I was marking it up, and you can see kind of on the right-hand page there, all these pen marks and stuff. I was circling things, putting stars next to funny things, crossing out stuff that was extremely negative, and marking up where the questions were. And I went back to the questions, and I realized, I want to start responding to these as essays. So in my weekly newsletter, I started writing responses to all these questions that I found in the book. And then those responses grew into bigger essays. And those went to my other newsletter. This is the great thing about having newsletters, is you're never for want of a place to put stuff. And these essays, these bigger essays in the newsletter, kind of grew into other things, like articles for Wired. I wrote about my glorious, almost disconnected, not a cave person, almost disconnected, boredom of my walk in Japan. And then from there, I realized there were all these subculture things that I was experiencing and witnessing, like all the really old people running cafes. This guy's a ballroom dancer. He's been running his cafe for a very long time. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's incredible. He's obsessed with Canada. His wife went to Canada once, and that was it. They were hooked. She traveled the world, and she went to Canada, and she came home, and she said, "Canada's the best." He said, "All right, I believe you. Let's rearrange our entire life around Canada." That makes sense. And I wrote about that for Eater. I wrote about this crazy, incredible culture of stuff that in 15 years is going to be gone. All of these people are going to be gone unless we reach the singularity, and then they can live forever running their Canadian cafes. But that's probably not going to happen in 15 years. And so I wrote this article. I walked 600 miles across Japan for pizza toast, which is very delicious. I recommend visiting Japan, but not only for pizza toast. And the funny thing is that I said this all started from a moment of intense exhaustion. But strangely, I was not exhausted walking 600 miles. In fact, I was energized. I was light. It was probably the most creatively fecund period ever in my life. I created more. I felt more alive. I felt more connected to people than at any other point ever of my being alive. And the SMS system was a big part of it. It came with a bunch of benefits. Bigger, more thoughtful loops. This is kind of the critical one. So many of the loops of communication that we are stuck in, or that we use, say on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, you go into Instagram, and the width of a loop on something like Instagram is seconds. You publish, and seconds later you're getting feedback, minutes, hours. It's very, very short. And here I was working with the SMS system where there's a lead of about 2 months before I saw the responses. And then from there, I'm still responding via essay over time. I'll probably be responding for a year after the walk. There's an obvious contract to this system, and I think this gets undervalued in a lot of the things we use. The contract in this system was very clear. You subscribe to this, and then we are done when the walk is done. Don't worry, you're not stuck in this if you don't want to be. I wasn't pulled out of the moment in my walk, and yet I wasn't in a cave. We were leveraging the incredible global network access that the internet provides. This is an incredible thing that's out there to be used. SMS turned out to be really intimate and unexpected. That was a great platform to use, and people seemed genuinely delighted. And really, the big takeaway is not that I expect all of you to go for 43-day walks, throughout Europe or America or South America or wherever you may be from. Although if you can do that, I recommend it. It's kind of an interesting experience. Use it as a platform. Be really intentional about it. But inside your organization or your community, think about the size of your loops. Think about what you can do. Should we be using asynchronous or real-time communication for these projects we're working on? Design comps, for example. What if you had everyone put their design comps on Monday up on a board, and then no one was allowed to respond to them until Wednesday? It probably changed the way you thought about those comps. You don't have to do that all the time, but it might be kind of a fun experiment to bake in as part of your process. Real-time versus asynchronous. So I guess we'll leave it there. I think there's only one more slide that just said thank you. So we're so close. But yeah, thank you all today for listening to these kind of strange experiments. I know they're not immediately applicable to everything that you're doing, but I hope that these two books, the Flipboard for iPhone book and this SMS book, offer archetypes for going forward and working on your teams, thinking about the boundaries of communication, what it means to put edges around a project, and what value that brings to the team, and thinking about what tools are you using. It's not about saying we need fewer tools in the world, because that's not going to happen. We're always going to make more tools. But it's about accounting for the tools that we're using and taking a moment to go, OK, we've got Slack, we've got Jira, we've got this, we've got that. Do we need all of these things at all times for every project at every moment? Yes and no. Maybe, maybe not. So thank you all for showering and getting dressed today. It's a big deal. That's worth more than I think we sometimes give it credit for. And I look forward to spending the day together and exploring these ideas and more with this incredible community. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. That was awesome. I don't know if I'm like a 40-day walker person. Like, I don't know if I could do that. But if I got to meet like Tomato Farmer at the end of that, I would totally walk for 40 days to meet Tomato Farmer.
He probably has a name.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, so we're actually going to be taking a quick break, about 5 to 7 minutes. So grab some coffee, refuel, and we'll see you right back here really shortly. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes. We'll be projecting this in all of the other rooms, so feel free to watch from any of the other rooms. But make your way back to your seats because we're about to get started.
We can sit on the chairs. Do you want to sit on the chairs?
I actually don't want to sit on the
Okay,
chairs.
well,
I feel like we should keep our standing. You know? I wish I had a coffee. A little extra.
Probably make that happen somehow.
A little jazz.
Oh, like a little cute.
I know, it's so cool. Everyone is just coming back in.
We're going to try to get started soon if everyone could kind of make their way in.
We're gonna get started soon, so grab a seat, get your coffee, hold it tight, all those things. All right, get this ball moving. Rolling? Moving. Whatever.
Moving, push. Maybe another minute.
It's so nice to see everybody here. Like, I feel like I see people's faces from the internet that I've only ever seen your face in like a circle, and now.
You need to bring like a little avatar guy.
Yeah, I know. I need like an avatar guide or something.
Hold like a little circle frame like on top. It'd be like.
What?
That helps. That helps.
Yes, it does. It
That's
does.
better.
In fact, if you had a cut out Bonnie Kate, would have been even better. Like, yeah. All right.
Start.
Yeah. One door closed. Okay.
All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and try to get started. It's all right if people start making their way in. Get that coffee going. Hope you had a lot of really good conversations out there, met a lot of new faces. I don't know if you've noticed what was on the screen before. We were zooming in and out of the quilt tiles that we talked a little bit about earlier. If you, again, I just kind of want to see a show of hands if you made a tile at all for the quilt.
Yes.
That is cool. That's awesome. One more round of applause for everyone who worked on that. We also wanted to give a little shout out to Alex, who made this adorable thing. There were a lot of different interpretations. Some people thought that it was a puffin. Some people thought that it was a Tide Pod, which I don't really see, but maybe it's there. I think it's just supposed to be a cute little Figma wrapped in a quilt. That's the goal.
Yeah, it was cool to see you all like remix something from a template we built. It was really awesome to see like all the different iterations and things. It's in a really fun sort of early example of what a collaborative community design project might look like. Design is really just at the beginning of its open source journey. And so our hope is in the Figma community, it will help enable creators to come together in more ways in the future. As Dylan mentioned earlier, we are inspired a lot by the impact GitHub has made in software doing this. And that's why we're so excited about our next speaker, who actually hails from GitHub. Devon Zuegel is a longtime contributor to open source projects. I know several of you have followed her work for many years from afar. I have. And now she's developing GitHub's first funding model for open source projects. Devon is here to share stories and insights from the front lines of the open source software world. She's really into urban planning, and Devon will use the lens of cities to get you thinking about these open source topics. When asked if she'd ever met anyone from the internet in person, she said that basically describes everyone I know, which is like same. Please join me in welcoming Devon Zuegel.
Thanks. Hello, I am Devon, and I'm the product lead of GitHub Sponsors, and I'm so happy to be here. So I'm a developer, an open source economist, sort of an armchair anthropologist. So you might be wondering what I'm doing here at a design conference. And it's because I've been hearing from some of the people in this room, the people at Figma, that design is really at the precipice of its open source moment. There's been so much more remixing happening recently. People are doing this multiplayer thing. You're all coming together and sharing each other's work and building on top of each other. And so I am just so excited to see this and to learn from all of you. I'm also here to share a little bit of the lessons that I've learned from studying open source communities, helping them, building them, funding the models, and just being friends with them. And I thought that it would be useful to share some of these stories with you as you embark on this journey all together. So we're going to take the lens of doing it through some cities. And this is because I adore cities, and I've also been told that designers like to geek out about urban planning almost as much as I do. So today we're going to take a journey through some of my favorite cities in the world. They are going to be from Paris to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Hong Kong, Japan, and beyond. And it's going to just be an amazing ride. So I'm really looking forward to this journey with you. Let's start our journey with Paris. Paris is one of the most beloved cities in the world, but it wasn't always this way. Paris of the early 1800s was a complete mess. It didn't have sewage. It had extremely narrow streets that were from the medieval ages. It didn't have just basic public health precautions. And the result was just really a lot of human trauma and horrible living standards. 4 out of 7 infants didn't make it to their first birthday. And so the level of human tragedy that was just caused because of this mess that was the city was immense. So in the mid-1800s, Emperor Emperor Napoleon III appointed this man named Baron von Haussmann to be the czar of the city. And he said, Haussmann, you can do whatever you want, just solve this problem, save the babies, fix the city, and make it beautiful. Haussmann took him up. He added modern sewage, and instantly that problem of cholera that was killing so many people went away. He widened the boulevards, and he made Paris one of the most beautiful cities in the world. If any of you haven't been, it's as amazing as people say. And a big part of this was that he was able to make really big steps on his own accord without having to ask a lot of permission, because he had to make some really big changes really fast. He did it in just 17 years. And so here's a photo of Paris that I just absolutely adore. It centers onto the Arc de Triomphe, which is one of the big landmarks of the city. And I love this picture because it just has beautiful radial symmetry, and it shows how Paris was a city that was planned from above, both literally and figuratively. And so you were able to get this gorgeous panorama, which was a very clear vision of Baron von Haussmann. There's another reason I like this picture too, though, and it's a lot darker. So if you look at these avenues that just slice through the city, you can kind of see where the old medieval streets were, where these neighborhoods, these businesses, these homes were. And von Haussmann, when they were in the way of his grand avenues and his grand plans, he just said, tough luck. Your house is going to be bulldozed. You're going to move to the outskirts of the city. It's for the greater good, and we're going to just keep moving on because progress. And these people really didn't get to have a say in the way that their city changed. Now, I imagine they were probably pretty happy that their babies were making it to their first birthdays now, and many of these people were pleased with the changes wrought on their city. But at the same time, they would have definitely preferred not to have their house torn down. And there's a lot of human misery that's shown in this photo too. So I think the story of Paris is very bittersweet. On one hand, it's created this beautiful jewel of a city that we all get to enjoy today. But on the other hand, it came at a cost. And that cost was people's voices weren't necessarily included in the process. So let's come a little bit closer to home, a little closer to modern day, to something that really reminds me of Paris. And no, we're not going to come to San Francisco. It's the Elm programming language, of course. Don't you see the resemblance? I think it's uncanny. No? OK. Well, I'll walk you through it. So Elm is a beautiful language. People who develop in this programming language just adore it. It is well designed. It has a cohesive vision for what programming should be. And people speak of Elm as like they've sort of found the holy grail of what programming languages should be. And especially when they're doing something that was originally designed for the language, they are just thrilled, and they have this beautiful, happy path that's a delight to program in. The author of Elm is this guy named Evan, who I've spoken to a few times to hear about how he runs community. And Evan has had this very clear vision from the beginning of what Elm should be. But the actual meaning of what it becomes has changed over time. So Elm was started in 2011, and 5 years later, in 2016, after there was a fair bit of usage of the language, Evan sort of had this realization from talking to people in the community and realizing that there was, even though people loved Elm, there was sort of this underlying problem with part of the architecture that was called signals. And he realized that signals weren't really necessary anymore, and it was making the language much more complex for no apparent reason. And so because he had to keep it all in his head, and he wanted to have this cohesive vision of what his project would be, after talking to some people in the community, he made the decision that they were going to take signals out, which really changed the way Elm works. In that period of time, he made a lot of efforts to try to make the transition smooth. He gave people tools that would allow them to transition. But at the end of the day, he made this big decision largely on his own, though again referring to some people. And he made it very quickly. He gave people 2 weeks to transition off of signals into these new systems. And the choice itself was very much appreciated by the community, and people I've spoken to since say it was like clearly the right decision to remove signals. much like it was the clear right decision to put modern sewage into Paris. But on the other hand, it was quite a surprise to some people in the community, and some people perceived it as Evan taking some steps that they weren't necessarily fully brought into. And so when I talked to Evan, he says that he has decided that he's going to try to make even more of an effort in the future to make sure that there's a longer period of time that he can pull people in and make sure that they have testing and their input is brought in. And so it's been so interesting for me to talk to Evan about how he thinks about these trade-offs as he moves forward in his community. Okay, so now we're going to go to a city that is very different from Paris. And that city is San Francisco, which we're all fairly well familiar with. So San Francisco, I adore. I live here. It's a beautiful city. But San Francisco definitely has some problems. I'm not going to list all of the problems because I only have a 30-minute time slot, but I promise you the list is very long. One of the biggest problems in my mind is that we have a severe housing shortage. I'm also going to spare you of my rants about land use policy in San Francisco. But the long story short is that we need to build more housing. There's a lot of people who want to come live here. There's not very many places for them to live. And so the housing prices have skyrocketed in the last few decades. It's really a severe problem for the whole city. A big part of the problem is this one tool that people use called discretionary review. Discretionary review is this law that's on the books of San Francisco that's pretty unique. And the way DR works, discretionary review, is that it basically says anytime you have a complaint, anyone, about a project that is going to be built, we'll stop and we will hold a hearing to hear your opinion. What this means in practice is maybe I live in Noe Valley and there's a project happening in the Mission or Pacific Heights or something like that, and I just don't like the color of paint of that building. And so what I can do is I can say, discretionary review is necessary. Let's host one. I want to talk about the color of paint. That color of mauve is just not right. And while I'm sure a lot of people in this room have a lot of opinions about the color of paint, we also sometimes need to move forward as a community, and we can't necessarily listen to every single voice. Because when you're making decisions, you're never going to have an entire community that agrees unanimously on almost anything. And so the problem with discretionary review is that you're able to stall projects for almost no reason whatsoever, and it means that projects just kind of don't happen, and it's too high risk for developers to come in and build apartment buildings that are very much needed for the city. So I'm sure you're all thinking, like, why don't we just get rid of discretionary review? It's like clearly a huge part of the problem. Let's just wipe it away, move on. Let's go to this glorious future where San Francisco is growing again. And the problem is that the story is actually a little bit more nuanced. While I think that discretionary review is very, very poorly written and is riddled with problems, it comes from a very long history that's actually very complicated. So in the mid-20th century, in the last century, there was this comprehensive highway plan, is what it was called. And the idea, you can see in these maps, that it just sliced right through the city, a bunch of different highways. This is when the 101 was planned, and a bunch of other highways. And over the course of the mid-century, each decade they added a few more highways into the city. But these highways disproportionately impacted low-income and minority neighborhoods, and they just kind of ruined the city. They created these urban chasms that segregated neighborhoods from each other and created a mess, created a lot of pollution within the city. And so by the 70s, San Franciscans had had enough. They agreed with me that these were a bad idea, and 30,000 San Franciscans, which is a huge portion of the city's population, signed a petition saying, no more highways, we are done. Luckily, people actually listened this time, people in City Hall who had this centralized power, and they started putting in place new rules like discretionary review, which made it possible for people to air their voices for really the first time when it came to urban planning. And so I think discretionary review comes from a good place, and it actually was a step in the right direction when it was first added. But today, it's just too vague and leaves too much room for interpretation, and you can really make anything into a discretionary review. Now it's not, this highway is going to bulldoze all of the neighborhood and all of my friends and family's homes. It's, I don't like the color of the paint on this building. So I think this centralization and decentralization from Paris to San Francisco and Elm to San Francisco, it's a pendulum, and we're always trying to find the right balance in the middle. So a programming community that really reminds me of San Francisco is the JavaScript standard. It's called ECMAScript, and it's basically what defines what JavaScript is. And the way decisions are made in ECMAScript is that there's a committee that is supposed to represent the entire JavaScript community, which is huge, as you all know. It's the biggest programming community in the world, and it has to be compatible with tons of different browsers, including old versions that are out of date, including your old IE6. And so they have to keep in mind a ton of different stakeholders. And because it's this core foundation of the internet, if ECMAScript breaks something backwards compatibility, then they break the internet. So they have a lot of responsibility, and they take that responsibility very seriously. And as a result, it takes them a very long time to make decisions and to really move forward and make major changes to the language. And again, this comes from a very important place, because people have built their entire businesses, their lives, their access to their bank accounts, on JavaScript. And so it's incredibly important that we don't break that backwards compatibility. But the trade-off is that we end up evolving JavaScript much more slowly than maybe something like Elm, which serves a different purpose in the community. So to step back, as we talked about San Francisco and Paris and Elm and JavaScript, the point that I'm trying to make is not that centralization is good and decentralization is bad, or vice versa. It's that it's complicated. These are trade-offs that every community has to make. The way that you distribute power and decision-making within a community is complex and comes with a bunch of different outcomes down the road. And really, it's a question of choosing which trade-offs you want to make. So as you go forth into your own design communities, I want to leave you with a thought that it's useful to think about these sorts of trade-offs as you design the communities, as you lead them, and as you join one that may have already existed, to understand what can you expect from the governance and the decision-making moving forward. OK, so on to our next city. We're going to zoom out from San Francisco, away from Paris, and we're going to head to the Big Apple, New York City. Yeah, it's a pretty great city. I mean, to be honest, the real reason I decided to do this talk was because I got to just talk about my favorite cities with you all. So New York is amazing, and the subway is really one of the big symbols of the city. But unfortunately, the city has not done a very good job of investing in the New York City subway in a very long time. You can see this photo of Chambers Street Station. It's falling apart. There's like mold. It's gross. But it's not just unattractive. It's actually just not working for the city. The trains have been coming really late. It took them an entire generation to build a new extension to the 2nd Avenue subway. And trains get stuck in the tunnels underground in the dark for sometimes hours. That doesn't happen that often, but you only need it to happen once for it to be pretty unpleasant. And so I think this is really sad, because it really clogs up the city. It shows that the city is not thinking in the long term. But this is not a fundamental problem with subways. Another city, another great city, Hong Kong, has a very different set of circumstances with their subway. Their transit system is called the MTR, Mass Transit Railway, and their stations are literally shiny. They just like glow, and they're so clean. The trains come on time almost all the time. When I was in Hong Kong about, I think, 18 months ago, I remember there was a train that was like 2 minutes late, and someone came onto the loudspeaker apologizing profusely in Cantonese. And the friend that I was with was translating for me, and I was just like, wow, if Bart was only 2 minutes late, what a dream. Wow. So Hong Kong really has its shit together, and they have done a very good job of investing in their long-term infrastructure. And one of the key pieces of this is something that is called land value capture. So the way land value capture works is basically, the basic concept is you can imagine there's a city with a transit network, and then there's a neighborhood over here, and that neighborhood is not very much connected to the network. Maybe there's like a donut shop or something in that neighborhood. It doesn't get a lot of foot traffic. Sad donut shop. If you add a station in that neighborhood, connecting it to the rest of the city, now suddenly that donut shop has tons of foot traffic. The city is happier because they have access to the donuts, and the land value prices increase because now it's connected to the rest of this network. And so what's happened is transit has created value out of nothing. Like, it's grown the pie for everybody. What happens in New York is that's where the story ends, and that's it. And the New York City subway still has to go beg for tax money. The MTR in Hong Kong has a very different approach. What they say is, we created this value, and it's a lot of value. We don't even need to capture all of it. But we just need to capture a small fraction, and we can invest that back into the transit system and help us build the next train station. And so they have this system that allows them to grab some of that funding, bring it back into the system, and continue that virtuous cycle of funding the projects that are creating the value and vice versa. And as a result, you have this beautiful system that works so well. So the way this ties back to open source is that because open source software and open source design is largely about giving things away for free, people haven't talked very much about funding this infrastructure, which I sort of think of it as digital infrastructure. And this creates some problems down the road. And I think we've started to see some of those costs in the software community for sure, and I'm sure in the design community. As you explore what it means to do open source, you'll also run into like, how can we invest back in and create that virtuous cycle? So as I mentioned, I work on GitHub sponsors, and our entire goal is to build funding models for open source so that we can create those virtuous cycles and benefit everybody. We're just getting started. We've built a few basic funding models to start with. But in the long term, I really hope to see that we're creating that virtuous cycle and benefiting both the users and the creator of open source for the long term. As you all think about funding your own communities, I think you should draw on land value capture and hopefully the future success of GitHub sponsors as inspiration for how you could fund your own work and make sure that it's really sustainable in the long term so that we all win in the end. All right. So that was New York and Hong Kong. We're going to head back to California, but this time we're going to go to LA. Unfortunately, on our way there, we are probably going to get stuck in traffic. Not very much fun. I'm also not very much fun when I'm on a road trip to LA, because I always like to remind my friends, not only are we stuck in traffic, but we are the traffic. And what that means is that every time you get on the road, you are creating traffic for everybody else. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get in your car. Doesn't mean you should stop going places. But you have to remember, when you are like honking hard at the person in front of you, the person behind you is just as annoyed. And so congestion is a problem that plagues a lot of cities. It's also a problem that plagues open source projects. And what this looks like is in the context of issues, or like the tickets that people open to ask for help on an open source project. And so here's a project called Joplin that I use. I also contribute to. I would like to think I'm more helpful than annoying to the maintainer, but realistically, I probably create a lot of work for him. And every time I open an issue, I first have a moment of like, well, you know, I wish they would respond faster. I wish they would like go more quickly. But then sometimes I realize that, oh man, when I open this issue, I'm making a line longer for everybody else. So now everyone behind me also has to wait a longer time. And so there's this challenge of you have to sort of outweigh there's this huge asymmetry between the number of people who create the open source software we use and open source design and the number of people who use it. Something like Joplin, I don't know the exact numbers, but there's one core guy who works on it. There's a few core contributors who help him. But then there's at least thousands of users, probably more than that. I just don't know the number. And what this means is that it can be completely overwhelming for someone who runs an open source project because there's the potential for the entire internet to be yelling at you. It's pretty stressful. And so when we think about congestion, I think it's also useful to think about this in terms of an open source project, like let's say an icon kit. Let's say you open source an icon kit and you create 100 beautiful icons for the world. You put them out there. People love you. They use it. And then someone starts asking, like, could you add a microphone icon? Why don't you have a waffle icon? There's not a meatloaf icon? How is that possible? And it just goes on, and people will start asking you to do things and insisting on all these things. And maybe you do want that waffle icon. Maybe that's exciting to you. But when everyone is rushing at you with feedback and ideas for how to improve the project, it means that it's harder to get to the most important feedback. And you end up having an increase of noise relative to the signal. And so to sort of come back to our city analogy, I think we can look to some cities for solutions to traffic problems. Unfortunately, LA hasn't taken notes on this one quite yet, but I hope they're watching this talk. So from LA, we're going to go to Singapore. And Singapore has something that's called congestion pricing. This is one of the main highways that comes from the airport. It is a beautiful highway. And you can see in like the middle of the day, it's almost totally empty. That might just be sort of a fluke. I actually don't really know when they took this photo. But I can tell you that the few times I've been to Singapore, there's very rarely a serious traffic problem. And that's because the way congestion pricing works is it says every time you get on the road, every time you drive a mile, you pay a little bit of money. And that little bit of money is to offset the cost that you're imposing on everybody else by being on the road. And it's a very small amount of money. It's maybe a few cents per mile, maybe less. I'm not really sure. And it may vary depending on how far you go, how much time you're on the road. It definitely adjusts by the time in the day. So you'll get charged more at peak traffic time and charged less in the middle of the night when the streets are already empty. And what this does is it makes people just think a little bit harder about, like, do I really need to make this trip right now? If I have my 11 a.m. meeting, do I have to drive to work at 7:30 in the morning? Could I just shift my journey by an hour or two? Or maybe, actually I don't need to do this at all. I can just call into this meeting. Now, there's definitely problems with congestion pricing, which I would love to talk with you all about after this. And there's nuances here too. It's no silver bullet. But it is super useful. And I've talked to a lot of drivers in Singapore, and they adore this system because it means that they never, ever get stuck in traffic, and they never have to honk their horn at somebody. So in the context of open source, whether it's software or design, you're building an icon kit, I think we could look to congestion pricing as inspiration for how to solve some of our problems. Don't worry, we're not about to put a toll booth in front of GitHub issues, but I think that we're starting to see some open source projects experiment with things like this. I've seen one maintainer who said, if you sponsor me on GitHub sponsors, then I will prioritize your issues because you've now shown to me that you're invested in my work. And it is a stronger signal that you really care about what's happening with this project, as opposed to some drive-by person who just opens an issue and says, this project sucks. You can ignore that one. That's fine. And so I'm excited to see more experimentation in this realm. I think open source has not solved this problem yet, whether it's design or software. But I'm really excited to see people starting to think in these terms. And I hope that the traffic analogy inspires you to think of even better solutions than the ones that I've described. All right, so we're coming out of Singapore, and we went to Los Angeles, and we have one last stop on our journey before we come back home, and that's Saitama, Japan. And as you just saw from Craig, who came from Japan, Japan is a beautiful country. It's famously super clean. If you've ever been to Japan, you could almost eat off of the sidewalks. It's so nice. It's beautiful. The air is fresh. It's lovely to walk around. But similar to Paris, it was not always that way. So I wonder if anyone will guess what these barrels are. Yeah, I don't think you want to guess. They're what's called night soil barrels, and they contain human excrement. Which is a really shitty situation. Let's just put it that way. As late as the 1970s, so really, really recently, like within probably your family's lifetime, Saitama, which is a city of 1 million people, did not have central sewage. I'm just gonna let that sit for a little while. It was nasty. And you would walk down the street, you would see these barrels, you would probably smell them first, and it was just a mess. On top of how gross it was also very expensive to service. To remove these barrels from the city was really inefficient and costly. It just was a bad system all around. And so in the 1970s, the residents of Saitama said, we've had enough. We are going to solve this problem for once and for all. And they put in central sewage. They did it in a way that was minimally disruptive to the city. They came up with some novel technological solutions that allowed them to open the ground without disrupting as many pipes, which is another talk, but it's very interesting technical solutions. And over the course of less than a generation, they went from 4% of the population connected to central sewage to almost everybody. And the remaining people, don't worry, they don't still have nice soil. They have like septic pumps or something like that. And so I tell this story because it gives me a lot of hope. Japan is now a beautiful place with very modern plumbing, in fact, more modern than here in many cases. It's a lovely place to be. It's very well run. But they actually just got their shit together, literally and figuratively, in the last few decades. And so I think this gives me a lot of hope, because every once in a while when I'm in the trenches of open source, I think, man, these problems are really hard. Like, are we ever going to solve them? But open source is about as old as Saitama's sewage. So we have a lot of hope to move forward, and I think these problems that seem so insurmountable sometimes are absolutely something that we can solve if we work together and we think of clever solutions. Okay, we have gone on a long journey together all around the globe. You guys are great travelers. And I just want to close with some thoughts around communities. And basically, I think you all are really the leaders of the design community. I've already spoken to a few of you today, and it's so fun to hear about all of the little experiments that you're running with how your open source communities can work, what that will look like. And I hope that some of the stories I've told about how these city communities and these software communities solve some problems will give you inspiration about how your design communities can solve problems too. At the same time, some of this is going to be really an unbeaten path. You're going to be solving new problems as well, and probably solving problems I don't even know exist quite yet. So I would love to stay in touch as you all go on this new journey together, and let me know what you learn. So thank you for having me, and good luck.
Thanks, Devon. I truly learned so much in those few minutes. I mean, it was such a beautiful connection between the design of cities and the notion of open source.
So far you've heard from just now an engineer and product manager talking about cities, and earlier you heard from both a writer and a photographer. Open design is clearly a part of a lot of the world around us, and another interesting lens that we thought would be interesting to explore would be through music. That's how we came in contact with Scott Hansen. Scott is a San Francisco two-time Grammy-nominated musician who goes by Tycho. What you might not know is he got his start as a designer and still considers his work an audio-visual experiment. Scott's work caught our eye because he pioneered a collaborative approach to album cover art with his 2019 single, Easy. He created a template image and then opened it up to his fans to customize and remix, and their art then formed the basis of the Spotify page. Scott will be joined by Khoe for an interesting conversation about community collaboration and creative tools. Khoe, one of our keynote speakers this afternoon and one of my personal mentors, is an interdisciplinary artist and designer who is most recently VP of Design at Khan Academy. She's also a DJ and re-becoming a musician, so we thought it'd be really fun to get them together to share their perspectives. Please join me in welcoming Scott and Khoe.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. You good?
All right. Are we on?
Yes?
Check. Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi. So I told Scott a little bit earlier when we were chatting that I'm going to tell him how I heard of him, which was back in, I want to say it was around 2008. I actually heard about you from the founding designer of Square, Robert Anderson. Oh, wow. At that time. Loved your design as ISO 50 and your music. And it actually inspired us, and this is kind of embarrassing to admit, so I'll admit it. It inspired us to make some music. I think he actually wound up getting one track into some indie movie somewhere as a result. Nice. So, that's awesome. And I think back then, one of the things that really struck me about it was like, how do you get to do this? How do you get to be a musician and a designer? Like, how did you get to wind up going full-time into music as that journey? So I was curious to hear a little bit more about that. Like, how did you juggle both those things?
Yeah, it was definitely juggling for a long time, and it was definitely kind of considering yourself a amateur musician and a professional designer. You know, I was a designer for probably like 10 years professionally while I was trying to get the music thing off the ground. But you know, there was so much overlap between those two, kind of the learning process and the journey to find your way to both of those, that I feel like I kind of was training for each in parallel.
So one thing that you mentioned I thought was really interesting is that you didn't study design. You weren't trained as a designer. So can you say a little bit more about that journey?
Yeah, it made me kind of feel like an outsider or like an imposter for a long time, because it's like I don't really know this stuff, and these people have like learned these things. But I think there's a beauty to finding your way to something and understanding it through the lens of your own experience and not having too much coaching. But then I feel like there are points where I feel like I had to work way harder to get to overcome some of the hurdles, especially as a designer, because I feel like visual communication there's a lot of rules that kind of really help you overcome some blocks, and those were things that I had to kind of find out the hard way. So it was, that's one thing I regret, is I wish I'd gone to school for design, but the music thing, I always felt like I enjoyed just finding my way through it.
It's on your own?
Yeah.
Do you remember like do you remember designing your first design, what that was like?
Yeah. I always did like art in high school and stuff. My first like computer-aided design, I went away to college. I went to USF here in the city, and in the 90s, so like computer graphics was pretty new, and like images being on the internet was really new. And we were like rebels, so we made like a zine for the college, like against anti-establishment zine, and we'd find all these like pictures of nuns holding shotguns, because it was a Jesuit it was a Jesuit school, and we'd use the computer lab printer to print them all up and put them in the stalls of all the bathrooms in the dorms. So I was really proud of myself for that one.
That's amazing. Do you still have copies?
I was actually looking, that hard drive died a long time ago, but I don't have any of the physical copies now.
Oh man, bummer. It'd be amazing to find a photo.
Yeah.
So how did you make the decision to go full-time into music after being a designer for so long? How did that all happen?
I think I'd been doing music for probably 10 years, playing shows, and it was about 2009, and I had built up all these kind of ideas. I had a record out, but it was kind of like, it had been years before, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do another one. And I was working at Adobe and like Macromedia when it turned into Adobe. And then I went on my own and did design for probably 4 years and did the blog. I had this blog called ISO 50 and really focused on like visual stuff. But somewhere around 2009, I felt like I had this collection of tracks that I wanted to take on the road, but like represent in a band context. Like I had been just doing like laptop stuff till then. So like I think that was the impetus for it, is like finding this group of people where we could represent this live, and like trying to find a way to translate this into the live space and have it be compelling. And that's what really got me engaged and made me want to do it for a living. Because once you start touring, you kind of that has to be your thing. So that was kind of the turning point.
Got it. So did you have to save up to do it, or how did you work that out?
Yeah, I had a few fortuitous situations. I got like I used to do a lot of t-shirt designs, and a couple companies stole the designs, and then subsequently had to pay me a lot more than they would have had to pay me for the licenses. So that was kind of like the nest egg for Tycho. One of those companies just went out of business, and their whole business model was doing this, so it was kind of nice to see that. Me and my wife were walking downtown, and we looked and we saw the empty store, and I was like, yes, there we go.
You're like, sometimes karma acts fast.
But yeah, I burned through that money, probably 2 years of funding the loss-leading tours of Tycho, and then finally, somewhere around 2014, it turned the corner, and it became something that made sense, and it was, it's been my career ever since, and I just feel really fortunate that it's working out. I'm always waiting for it not to be working out. I'm like so pessimistic about it, but it's going well now, so I'm happy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to read you this little quote that I love, and I think this will really resonate with the audience. By the way, I've been geeking out on this book by Questlove, Creative Quest. Love it. I don't know if you've had a chance or if you even have the time to read this thing. But the sentence is really lovely. It says, much of building your own creative identity is understanding yourself as part of a collaborative environment. And seeing your show last night, hearing about your collaborations with Zach, I really would love to know, what it's been like. How have your collaborators changed you? There's another little snippet in here that says, Prince gets credit as a singular genius. And obviously he was, but if you study him with any level of specificity, you see how important all of his creative partnerships have been. And I know that switching to live really changed your music, and obviously working with Zach and Rory has changed it a bunch. So I'd be curious to hear more specifics, the types of things that have changed as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's immeasurable, and that's exactly what started it. Is we started playing as a band, playing my music live, and then the way that they translated it and the way that they took it and opened it up, and you saw different elements come to the forefront. It just gives you a lens and a different perspective on your own work that I don't think you'd ever have otherwise. And then, so we decided let's make the next record together, which was Awake. And I feel like for me, that was the most growth between any records. That was like the biggest change and the biggest evolution, and that was because of both of them. And their contributions to that just opened it up into a whole new dimension that I really never could have imagined. And I was always into like rock, and I loved the idea of bands, and I always wanted to be in a band, but nobody asked me to be in a band because I wasn't a musician until
so you
I was
had
20.
To make one.
Yeah, so I just made my own band. And then, but yeah, that was a huge moment. When we made that record, it just all kind of clicked, and so yeah, the touring part of it is what really taught me like the collaborative process and how powerful that could be.
Mm-hmm. More recently, Saint Sinner.
Yeah.
How's that gone? That's a whole thing. So for people who don't know, this is new for you, like working with a vocalist and having a vocalist really take front and center, right?
Yeah, well, I guess so. Like 2004, when I was working on my first record, Past the Prologue, it was actually the concept. It was going to be a vocal record, and I had recorded all these vocals, but I wasn't in the right place to make it into a full-blown vocal record, because I was really into like 07 and cinematic orchestra and all that stuff. And so like that was my goal, is to do something like that. So I ended up using all those as like vocal snippets and kind of like abstract layers in the music over the years. But this was the first time I was like, okay, it's been all this time, and it's like I need to revisit this idea and make like a literal, vocal record. And so I connected with Hannah kind of like just serendipitously, and it ended up being this perfect combination, like the texture and the timbre of her voice. It just kind of flows into the music like kind of another instrument. It was a really fun experiment.
Did it change the way you created?
Yeah, for that album for sure. Yeah, because I always, I typically write these basic ideas, and then iteratively, like I always think of the process is what's going to design the final product. So it's like I'm running it through these filters and this process that I've designed in the studio, and this time, it kind of that whole middle part got pulled out, and it was like I just had these concepts, gave them to her, and she just turned them into this whole other thing, and it was like you're presented with this completely new idea. So finding a way, I think of myself as a producer, but not really, because producers can go in and take other people's ideas and understand them immediately and like know what needs to be changed and how this could be better. And for me, that was like my first real, experience with that, is like having to be presented with this completely new idea, and what do you do with this, and how do you make sense of it? So I really feel like I learned a ton during that process.
I'd be curious to know what there was like. Do you have like a specific thing that you're like, I didn't know about this, and then?
Yeah, I think space, creating space in your compositions, and vocals want to be the main element, and I've never thought of like. If the music is really just this kind of textured tapestry type thing, and I don't ever think of one thing. There's very seldom like a lead or something that's just cutting through the whole mix and like this is the main event. But vocals, they kind of need to be the main event. If they're buried, it kind of doesn't, at least for what I wanted this record to be, I felt like that had to happen. So learning how to pare back and to scale back all the millions of layers going on in there was an interesting process. And by the end, I realized, I don't even really need that. Like that's not serving a purpose. So it taught me a lot about like, breaking down your own work and deciding what really needs to be there and what's important to most efficiently communicate whatever the idea it is that you're trying to communicate.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
It's interesting because around that, you'd mentioned earlier that your design work has been becoming more and more minimal over time too.
Yeah.
Those two things happening together, or?
Yeah, I think with design, like, because I was always just kind of teaching myself, I kind of like stagnated. You know, for a long time, I didn't feel like I overcame some of the hurdles that I was trying to overcome, and I was always really into the kind of the Swiss style and minimal European design, but I just felt like there was something going on there, a code that I couldn't crack. So it just took me a long time to learn about color theory and layout and design before I felt like I could approach that style and have it still be compelling. Because my old style was like, throw 8,000 layers at the wall and hope that it looks, it's like, creating these almost like paintings, which, I appreciate that too, but, there was a part of me that really wanted to be like a true designer. And when I think of graphic design, I think of minimalism and efficient communication.
Right, yeah. I feel like it was funny to hear about what you like to do with those shapes, though, that you don't just leave them there, that you spend a lot of time beating them up, distressing them, and blurring them. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think, so my problem I've always had with computer-generated graphics, or computer-generated anything, is I feel like it's too perfect in a way, and I think some people use that in a really effective way. In their work, I can see that they're leaning on that and they're using that as an aesthetic. But for me, I want things to feel like a photograph or like an emulsion or a transfer, like letraset stuff in films, titles and stuff. I just love that vibe. So like learning the process of how to make the edge of a digital element blend with a photograph or a raster element or textures, that was a long process of learning. And just like, so for any of the images, always just blur the edge of the text and then put a grain layer over and then do like multiply modes to get that nice edge where you get that dark, like clarity edge on there that looks like it's a transfer. So just subtle things. I used to just put tons of like paper layers and all that, and now I'm trying to be more subtle about it and have it be like, you can't really pick it out, but like it affects you still. Like you're still perceiving it, you just couldn't like articulate what you're seeing.
Right. Yeah.
That's the idea, is to keep it kind of like subdued.
So speaking of all of those layers, how did you come up with the idea to involve your fan base collaboratively with Easy, and how did that whole thing go?
Well, this whole record, Weather, was all about, because I think Tycho and the instrumental music in general is all about kind of creating this space for people to, they connect with it and make it their own. It's their own journey. It's a personal journey because there's not much meaning really built in that's obvious. Like you have, it means something to you, but it's not necessarily something that you expect everyone else to interpret that way. So I wanted this record to be all about one person's specific experience with the music, and that's what Hannah was about. Is now you're hearing these literal lyrics and the way that she's interacting with that space. So I thought I wanted the imagery to be collaborative as well, and these are the first album covers. That album cover was the first one where I used a photograph by somebody else. Nirav Patel took that. So like I wanted it to be somebody else's experience. So then we thought like, the next level of that would be to open it up to everyone else. And it was just to see all that stuff come back and to see your own kind of like the core ideas extrapolated and taken to these totally different other spaces was really, again, you learn a lot about your own work.
Did you have any surprises or favorite things that came?
That's how good it was. I was like, what the heck? I was like, I wish that was the one I thought of.
Did you know that, so just those of you who design music interfaces, and obviously I got a lot of reactions when people found out we were going to be on stage together. I think a lot of designers who have to design music interfaces will use your album and your artist profile because everything just looks amazing automatically because you designed all this beautiful art, and it just, that way people don't have to put ugly placeholder art. Have you ever thought about doing something similar with the music?
Yeah, definitely. I think on a kind of small scale, having remixes by other artists is kind of like that. Like, obviously you select the artist and it's somebody that their work, so there's not huge surprises, but to see the way that they interpret that is always interesting. But yeah, I think the next logical step is I want to put the stems out as like a remix project just out to the public and just see what comes back. I think Little Dragon did that once, and that was really inspiring, so I think that'd be cool to try.
What kinds of things do you think you might learn about your own music?
I always feel like people pick up on the background, what I think of as background textures, and they bring them to the forefront, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's like compelling. That's interesting and compelling on its own, like almost as like ambient music. Because I'm always trying to like, I always think there needs to be this like melodic element to like tie it together, but sometimes just like gauzy soundscapes are fun too.
The Gauss showing up in absolutely everything. Do you have a favorite creative tool? And it could anything, Minimoog, whatever it is, that you could describe what it is that you love about and how it is that it informs you. Like, do you feel like your work is super shaped by that tool in some way?
I mean, yeah. I think the computer, as cliche as that is, the computer is absolutely the most important tool I have. I mean, I know it's broad because there's many tools on it, but just the idea of like being able to explore, you know, have undo states and have non-destructive editing where you're pushing into these other spaces and then pulling back and like learning a lot about that path, but not taking it and taking another one. That's huge, and that opened everything up for my process. But yeah, I mean, I think Minimoog is probably the most inspiring instrument or device I've ever interacted with, and that kind of informed all of my music since I got it. I think I started with that on Dive, and that became kind of my sound.
Do you know what it is about it that?
It's just a living, breathing instrument. It was designed in the 60s, and it's analog, and it's not every time it's different, and it behaves in this really organic way where it does feel like it's changing and it's moving with you, and you form a relationship with them. They all sound different. Like you can play another one and it sounds different, totally different than yours.
Whoa. Yeah,
it's like a guitar, you know. And it was also the first integrated synthesizer, or the first commercially available one. So it's like the archetype for the way that all synthesizers were made afterwards. Like the way that the oscillators go into the filter section, and you have the two envelopes, one for the filter, one for the amplifier. Like that, it's really interesting seeing a tool like this and realizing this guy, Bob Moog, he invented this at that time. And like, this is what I think a synthesizer is, and you forget somebody was just guessing their way through this, thinking what would be the coolest way to lay all these things out, you know, and like pitch wheels and mod wheels, like we take those things for granted, but like that was a novel concept at the time.
Do you ever think about what it would be like to take something like that and apply it to design? Like what if you took all those same outputs and you attach them to, because you've been playing with video, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like if you were to somehow change all those buttons, I always wonder what it would mean to take a tool for sound and hook it into visuals and have it manipulate something like what?
Well, so the Critter and Guitari makes this thing called the organelle, which basically does just that. It's this little thing I have. It has an HDMI out, and it's like a synthesizer and a sampler. It can be anything. It's like a little, I don't know what the processors are in, but it's an open-ended architecture. You can basically write your own software for it, but it has a visual component to it, so it's really cool. And they do like video synths, but I used to do, the live show used to mostly just me manipulating visuals with a program called VDMX, which is like a modular video editing environment, or effects environment. And I'd use this controller, and it was really cool. You could lay out the software any way you wanted, and you could map a controller to it. So you could basically create like a video synth. And like that was, so when I moved to Premiere, which I do most of my visuals in now, it was like a really huge learning curve because I used to just record the outputs of that thing, and it was like this very like in the moment, like performance-oriented thing where you're just kind of like doing stuff on the fly, and to translate that into this very like kind of procedural process was kind of like a learning curve for me.
Did you like it, or like how did you feel?
Well, I look back at that old stuff and I go, yeah, it's dirty and it's messy and it doesn't hit always at the right time, but it's like there's way more. There's sometimes much more interesting things going on, you know, like the accidents and all the stuff that you couldn't really kind of like think of in this clinical environment of working in front of a computer.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. In this Questlove book, he also talks about how when he first started drumming, he really wanted to sound like a machine. And then he realized that those little mistakes, all of those little things actually warm it up. They really give things like more of a human touch.
Yeah,
and it's interesting to kind of want that back.
Yeah.
Take a quick look here at all of the things, because I think we've got a little bit left. Oh yeah, this was something that struck me. Thanks again for the show last night. There's these really beautiful moments when you'd put on a guitar, you'd walk over to Zach, and the two of you were standing in front of each other, like looking at each other and looking at each other's hands. So this is this live, in the moment collaboration going on. Can you say more about what's happening in that moment? I just found that really lovely, like just having the good vibes, the collaboration shine on stage. I think the audience picks up on the fact that you all collaborate well. Can you say more about what's happening?
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't know how to explain it. It's like this really deep connection that you have with somebody when you make music together, you know, when you're just in a room and like you're speaking to each other in this other language, and it's really powerful. Like I'm not a very great, I don't consider myself a great communicator, or like I don't relate with people as well as I would like to in normal life all the time. So like music is my way of like truly connecting with somebody and like, you know, communicating these really like deeply held ideas without saying anything. So like, you know, Zach was the first person I ever met that like kind of we vibed in that way, because, you know, it doesn't always work with everybody. So like, you know, on stage you have all these people in front of you, and it's kind of there's a lot of pressure, and I don't always deal well with that either. So like sometimes you get out of the performance and you're just thinking about the notes and you're just thinking about don't screw up. But, you know, when you walk over there, it's almost, and you're just looking at each other and you're close to the other guys, like it's like you feel like you're back in the studio and you're just in that moment. So like that's always like a moment you can recenter on stage and be like, we're making music, you know, this isn't about like doing everything perfect. It's just like, you know, relax and act like you're back in the studio. So that always recenters everything.
Oh, that's interesting. I felt like you could feel that.
That's good. I'm glad that translated.
Yeah, it was really lovely. So is there anything that you're trying to accomplish now that you're like, I can't do that yet? There's this thing that I have in my head that I really want to be able to do, and I just don't feel like I'm there yet.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a couple things that I can really, you know, articulate. Yes, it's a specific thing, but there's also just this overall, you kind of have this, I don't know, I've just always like thought of it as this idea that's up there, and you can't really describe it or make it out, but it like shows parts of itself to you over time, and you hope that each album's chipping away at it, and like the next one's going to be the one that brings it all together. But I don't know. Right now, I'm just focused on like kind of returning to electronic music and my roots, and like trying to, you know, I feel like when I started out, I was really into drum and bass and like '90s. That, you know, the sound design around that sound of like Bristol drum and bass, Ronnie Size and Photech and all that.
Oh yeah, just real quick for people in the audience, we figured out just before coming on stage, we've kind of gone through similar phases. We've had like kind of a metal phase, right?
Yeah.
And then a drum and bass phase. So y'all kind of get how old we are. Ronnie Size, anyone heard of Ronnie Size?
Yeah.
Anyone else saw him live during Represent?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so you were saying.
But yeah, like when I was getting, that was the vector for me, is like technology samplers. I was like, I can understand those things, because I never played an instrument till I was about 20. And I heard Logical Progression by LTJ Bookham. And actually Photech Pharaoh was the song that really like clicked, and I just, you know, I could never make those sounds. It took me forever to even understand how he did them. So I'm trying to come back now with everything that I've learned and like start to make music like that, or like make like a little EP of drum and bass stuff.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh man, it's funny because I feel like people are talking about drum and bass again.
It's
I feel
weird.
Like
I've
we went through
that.
this phase and then it was gone, and now people are like drum and bass and trip hop all over again.
Yeah, and luckily they're paying attention to the good part of drum and bass, not the one that like early 2000s it got too intense and like heavy. Like all that atmospheric cool stuff, like in the mid-90s, that was the sweet spot for me. For me, at least. I don't know. That other stuff was cool in a way, but yeah, it was too heavy.
Yeah, it got really intense after a while.
Yeah, drill and bass and all that stuff, all the weird variants.
But we were also laughing a little bit about how, especially when you were a kid, if you were into metal, then you can take the kid away from metal, but you can't get the metal out of the kid. So like, do you feel like some of those, like, does that stuff still come through? Do you feel like
yeah, and I mean, that's another thing I want to do. I really want to, like, Epoch, I feel like was like trying to like express that part of my history, and what inspires me is like kind of bring the rock elements into it. So I think one of the next records will definitely be like a heavier, more kind of like guitar driven, logical extreme of that. Wherever that record was headed, this will be the destination.
Do you think we'll ever get to hear you sing on a record?
Eventually I'll put something out like that. I have some songs, but I mean, it's mostly like, you know, vague ambient space, massive reverb, so you can't really tell it's vocals. Hiding behind effects stuff, so no. Yeah, you're not going to hear me with an acoustic guitar doing a folk unplugged set anytime soon.
That's amazing. Is there anything you feel that I didn't ask that you were like excited to talk about?
No, I mean, that feels like it covered a lot of stuff. I think that, the collaborative process, I think that's just something that I've come to later in my career. I'm a pretty introverted person, so like that was never something that really occurred to me, and it took a long time to learn how to work with other people, and it took a lot, you know, it's really hard to overcome kind of the lack of tools that there are in the world for those things. And so like finding my way through that process, and, you know, the ups and downs, and finding the positives of it, it's been amazing. So it's like to see something like this, you know, everybody coming together for something like this, it's really inspiring.
Okay, last question, I think. How are we doing for time? If you had to pick between a triangle, a circle, a trapezoid, and a hexagon, and you could only pick one, which one would you stick with?
A circle, of course, yes. Circle's the best. Circle's the best. Perfect. A perfect circle.
I love the way that all of that, you've got such strong branding elements, and then seeing them come to life via video on stage, yeah, that stuff was powerful.
Yeah, like that. I mean, yeah, I lean on the circle a lot. I keep coming back to that. The triangle's like this really powerful, edgy thing. Like it feels like dark or something, like crystal energy in there or something. So that's like the dark arts when you bring that in. But then the circle's like, oh, the sun, it's nice, happy, round.
Is it the principle that you have of wanting to be able to have people project themselves into what's, leaving enough room for the person, which I really love, to see what they want or to hear what they want? Does that have another story behind it? Does that come from something in your life or something personal, or is it?
Yeah. So when I first came here, I moved here in 1995 to go to school, and we were in the computer lab, and we had like access to all these batteries and speakers. So we built this backpack with these big speakers on them, and we'd walk up into the Twin Peaks like hills in the middle of the night, where it was like all foggy and like it's like a rainforest up there at night, and we played like logical progression or blast, whatever, some like trippy drum and bass stuff, and we just like wander around in those woods, and like those are like the most formative experiences of connecting an experience to music, connecting music to like what you were doing. And I'll always remember, I always smell the eucalyptus and like taste have the dew on your skin and all that stuff. Like that will always be this visceral experience that I have when I listen to that music, and that's always what I've tried to do with my work, is like create something that someone can take and attach to an experience and bring back all those senses every time you hear that music, no matter where you are.
Wow. Damn, that makes me think around the time that you were doing that, I think I was driving around the Northwest with the music on full blast, the heat all the way up, the windows down.
That's awesome.
Same thing, like moisture.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's amazing. Are we at time? We're at time. Thank you so much. It's been really fun chatting.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thanks.
That was amazing. I'm so inspired. I feel like I should become a DJ, just so I fit in. Like, should designers be DJs? Okay, anyway. Before we break for lunch, we do want to tell you a little bit about how this afternoon is going to work.
For wayfinding, you might have noticed that we use a few colors and all things related to config, and this is by design. Each room in the venue is color-coded, so all the signs and the agenda correlate to that color.
And we also wanted to make it easier to know when to move from session to session. Remember this playlist some of you worked on in our Slack channel? Well, we're going to use that to mark the end of each session. Think of it like musical chairs. And so when you hear music, that means it's time to get up and head to the next session. If you don't feel like going to a session, like you have free will, use your wings. And there's other things you can do. So we have an area where you can grab swag. It's titled Store, but it's free. An area where you can leave us some thoughts about Figma. We love feedback, obviously. A demo bar where you can get your questions answered by our engineering, product, and support teams.
There's a space to get involved with our user groups around the world. And also a mentorship cafe from 3 to 5 p.m. where you can meet with your mentees and mentors. So we were told that's a lot of information at once, and so it's sometimes nice to say something and say it again, but we also thought that can be boring, so we're gonna put those slides up again and then just say whatever the first word that comes to mind is when we see the picture.
I apologize in advance because I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth.
All right, let's go from the top.
Free.
Socks.
Okay.
I don't know.
There's not even socks in there. Words.
Smart stuff. Figma.
Yeah.
It looks like.
Help? Yeah, help. Chairs and friends.
Plants. I mean, there's plants everywhere.
Twigma.
Learn. Coffee, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are all the spaces. You should go to them if it's helpful.
All right, enough of that. Thank you so much. Thanks for spending the morning with us. I truly had such a blast. We had a blast doing this. Now go get some lunch on the patio or in the gallery and meet a new face. We hope you have a good afternoon, and we will see you back here later today.